The ragged human gasped as the Krenim slaver's vice-like grip tightened around his throat. The alien warlord Spica laughed cruelly, relishing the fear in his captive's eyes. This pathetic species would be crushed like all the others. My lord, I must advise caution. The humans are special, unlike any race we've enslaved before. The words of Spica's mysterious observer echoed in the warlord's mind as klaxons blared through the command ship. On the bridge view screen, a small force of human vessels approached the edges of the Terra Nova system, hopelessly outmatched by the massed Krenim warfleet. Spica sneered, the arrogance of these primitives sending mere dozens of ships against his armada. Did they not realize their doom was at hand? At that moment, light years away on Earth, Lieutenant Alexander Hawkeye Cook stood ramrod straight as Earth's Defense Council outlined the dire situation. The Krenim juggernaut had cut a swath of destruction across the stars, conquering and enslaving, and now they turned their sights on humanity's most vital colony of Terra Nova. Cook clenched his fists in barely restrained fury as the council described the horrors the Krenim inflicted on those they conquered: torture, forced labor, mass executions. Millions would suffer that fate on Terra Nova if the Krenim were not stopped here and now. And stopping them fell to Cook and his outnumbered, outgunned band of human pilots and commandos. Humanity's survival hung by a thread. The next few hours would decide the fate of Terra Nova and perhaps Earth itself. Cook's small fleet had only one advantage the Krenim did not: the sheer audacity and reckless courage humans were notorious for. The indomitable human spirit that had broken the bounds of their homeworld to carry them to the stars. As Cook squared his shoulders and strode to his waiting starfighter, an iron determination hardened his features. I guess it's time to show these Krenim bastards why they should have listened when they were warned about us primitive humans, Cook muttered darkly as his engines roared to life. As Cook's fighter screamed through the void towards the massed Krenim warships, his comm crackled to life. All units, this is Hawkeye. Engage the enemy. Draw their fire away from the colony. The human ships descended on the Krenim fleet like a swarm of angry hornets. Impossibly agile, they wove through storms of enemy fire, peppering the lumbering alien craft with surgical strikes. The Krenim responded with a wall of missiles and energy beams, but the humans' unorthodox tactics had them struggling to draw a bead. Cook singled out a hulking battle cruiser and gunned his engines, rocketing towards its overflowing weapons arrays. His targeting computer shrilled a lock, and he unleashed a volley of plasma torpedoes. The glowing orbs ripped into the cruiser's flank, sending gouts of flame and debris spewing into space as its particle beams fell silent. Hell yeah, direct hit! That's one for Terra Nova! Cook's wingman Jensen whooped over the comm. All across the battlefield, the outmatched human pilots threw themselves at the enemy with renewed fervor, rallied by their commander's valor. On the bridge of his command ship, Warlord Spica watched the impossible scene play out with rage bubbling in his gut. His mighty armada, the scourge of 100 systems, was flailing against a handful of primitive ships. It defied belief. I warned you not to underestimate them, my lord, Zorax whispered from the shadows. Humans are a kind unique in the cosmos. They... Silence! Spica roared, slamming a fist onto his armrest. I will not hear any more of your ridiculous fantasies about these savages. Zorax bowed his head to hide a knowing smile. As you command, Lord Spica. Unbeknownst to Spica, a fierce battle was already raging within the bowels of one of his warships. Marcus and his commandos had boarded the vessel through a ragged hull breach, plunging into the heart of the enemy. Krenum's soldiers swarmed to meet them in the close confines, energy scythes flashing. The human guns roared in the tight corridors, scattering the aliens like leaves. But more always came. Sarge! We're getting torn to shreds in here! Corporal Davis cried, as a scythe blade slashed his armor open. Marcus silenced the attacker with a blast to the skull before turning to his bleeding squad mate. On your feet, Davis! We push forward whatever it takes. Marcus hauled the corporal up by his chest plate. The colonel is counting on us. With gritted teeth, the humans surged deeper into the warship, buying their vital prize with blood. On the besieged surface of Terra Nova, Commander Hawkins ducked plasma bolts as he rallied the colony's ragtag defenders. Crenum landing craft disgorged streams of enemies, marching on the human positions with relentless discipline. "They're trying to flank us to the east," Major Chen reported as alien tanks rumbled over the horizon. Hawkins cursed under his breath. "Redirect our armor to intercept," Hawkins barked into his headset. "And somebody get those damn civilians away from the front line before they get slaughtered." All across the defensive perimeter, colonists rushed to bolster the professional soldiers. Shopkeepers, farmers, and mechanics took up arms and manned barricades, putting their intimate knowledge of Terra Nova's terrain to work. They would not let their world fall without a fight. Meanwhile, Cook's heart pounded in his ears as warning lights flashed angry red across his controls. Razor beams and shells perforated his fighter, atmosphere venting from a dozen rents in the hull. There was no choice. Cook yanked the ejection lever, and explosive bolts blew the cockpit canopy clear. The sudden decompression ripped him out into the starry expanse, his ship spiraling away in flames beneath him. But Cook's blood ran cold as he spotted a second Crenum fleet dropping out of hyperspace in the distance, fresh warships eager to join the carnage. They were too many. Even the humans' courage could not stand against such numbers. Terra Nova was doomed. But in that moment of darkest despair, a new force entered the battle unlooked for. Gleaming silver ships knifed from the stellar depths, energy lances cutting through the Crenum reinforcements like a scythe through wheat. The aliens broadcast an open transmission even as they drove into the foe. "People of Terra Nova, we are the Ether. We come in peace and in common cause against the Crenum scourge. Let us fight together this day as friends." Cook nearly wept in relief at the sight. The tide had turned. They could still carry this fight. The battle for Terra Nova raged on, but now the spark of hope had been rekindled in human hearts. The first of many battles in a greater war. The battle for Terra Nova had ended, but the war was just the beginning. Alexander Cook stood in the dimly lit lab of the Etheri outpost, his eyes fixed on the strange artifact before him. Its surface glowed with an otherworldly light, pulsing with hidden knowledge. "What exactly are we looking at here, Zorax?" Cook asked, glancing at the enigmatic alien observer. Zorax stepped forward, his long fingers tracing the intricate patterns on the artifact. "This, Lieutenant Cook, may be the key to humanity's survival. It contains information about latent genetic potential within your species, abilities that could turn the tide against the Crenum." Cook's mind raced with possibilities. "You're saying we could become superhuman?" "In a manner of speaking, yes," an Etheri scientist chimed in. "But the process is not without risk." Despite the warnings, Cook knew they had no choice. The Crenum threat loomed large, and humanity needed every advantage it could get. "I'll do it," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes." The procedure was excruciating. Cook lay strapped to a table, his body racked with pain as Etheri nanotechnology rewrote his genetic code. He gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out as it felt like every cell in his body was being torn apart and reassembled. Hours passed in a haze of agony. Finally, the pain subsided, and Cook opened his eyes. The world looked different, sharper, more vivid. He sat up, marveling at how effortless the movement felt. "Did it work?" he asked, his voice stronger and clearer than before. The Etheri scientists ran their scans, their eyes widening at the results. "Incredible," one murmured. "Your strength, speed, reflexes, they're off the charts." Cook flexed his hand, watching in awe as energy crackled between his fingers. He focused, and a blast of force erupted from his palm, leaving a scorch mark on the far wall. Before they could fully process the implications of Cook's transformation, alarms blared throughout the outpost. Crenum forces, led by the vengeful Spica, had launched a surprise attack. Cook sprinted to the defense, his enhanced speed carrying him faster than he'd ever moved before. He burst into the main hangar just as Krenim troops poured through a breach in the outer defenses. Without hesitation, Cook leaped into action. He moved like lightning, dodging energy bolts with impossible speed. His fists connected with Krenim's soldiers, sending them flying across the room with bone-crushing force. As more enemies swarmed in, Cook focused his newfound energy manipulation abilities. A wave of force erupted from his hands, bowling over a dozen Krenim troops like bowling pins. The battle raged on, Cook at its center. He was a blur of motion, decimating the Krenim forces with superhuman strength and energy blasts. Even as fatigue began to set in, he pressed on, driven by the knowledge that he alone stood between the Krenim and the secret that could save humanity. Finally, he came face to face with Spica herself. The Krenim warlord's eyes widened in shock as she beheld Cook's transformation. "What have you done?" she snarled. Cook didn't waste breath on words. He charged, moving faster than Spica's eyes could track. His fist connected with her jaw, sending her reeling. She lashed out with her energy scythe, but Cook dodged it effortlessly. The two traded blows, Spica's advanced weaponry against Cook's newfound abilities. But it quickly became clear that the Krenim leader was outmatched. With a final devastating energy blast, Cook sent Spica crashing through a wall. Battered and bloodied, Spica staggered to her feet. "This isn't over, human," she spat, before activating her emergency teleporter and vanishing in a flash of light. In the aftermath of the battle, Cook stood amidst the destruction, his knees going weak from the implications of what had just occurred. The Athiri scientists approached cautiously, their eyes filled with a mix of awe and trepidation. "We can replicate this process," one of them said. "Create more like you, an army capable of standing against the Krenim." Cook nodded slowly, but a seed of doubt had taken root in his mind. The power coursing through him was intoxicating, but also terrifying. And as reports came in from other test subjects, some dead, others horribly mutated, he realized the road ahead would be fraught with danger. As Cook and his team raced to refine the process, word of the genetic enhancements spread. Earth's leaders argued fiercely over the ethics of creating super soldiers, while the Aetheri alliance grew strained under the weight of this new development. The battle against the Krenim had entered a new phase, but Cook couldn't shake the feeling that an even greater conflict loomed on the horizon. Alexander Cook stood before the United Earth Council, his enhanced physique taut with barely contained frustration. The circular chamber buzzed with tense whispers as he faced down the assembled leaders. "We cannot continue this reckless pursuit of genetic enhancement," Councillor Zhang declared, her voice echoing through the room. "The risks are too great. We've seen the devastation wrought by unstable subjects." Cook's fists clenched at his sides. "And what of the devastation wrought by the Krenim? How many more worlds must burn before we embrace our only hope of victory?" "At what cost, Alexander?" Councillor Mbeke interjected, leaning forward. "We're talking about fundamentally altering what it means to be human." "We're talking about survival," Cook shot back. He strode to the center of the chamber, his footsteps unnaturally light despite his imposing frame. "I've seen what these enhancements can do. I've felt it. We have the power to turn the tide of this war, to save countless lives." The council chambers erupted into chaos, voices shouting over one another. Cook stood unmoved at the eye of the storm, his enhanced senses picking up every word, every nervous heartbeat. As the clamor died down, Fleet Admiral Reyes spoke up. "While I share some of the Council's concerns, we cannot ignore the tactical advantage these enhanced soldiers provide. The recent defense of Earth is proof of that." Cook nodded gratefully at the Admiral. "Give me more volunteers, more resources. I can refine the process, minimize the risks." "And create an army of unstoppable super soldiers?" Councillor Zhang scoffed. "What happens when the war is over? What place will these enhanced have in our society?" Before Cook could retort, alarms blared throughout the chamber. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a massive Krenim fleet emerging from hyperspace near Mars. "They're back," Cook growled, his body already thrumming with combat-ready energy. "And this time, They won't catch us unprepared. Without waiting for the council's approval, Cook sprinted from the chamber. His enhanced speed carried him to the nearest hangar in minutes. There, he found his team of augmented warriors already suiting up. "Saddle up, people," Cook barked as he donned his own specialized combat suit. "This is what we've trained for. Show these Krenum bastards what humanity is truly capable of." The enhanced soldiers moved with preternatural grace and speed, loading into sleek assault craft. Cook took his place at the helm of the lead ship, his heightened senses processing the flood of tactical data with ease. As they rocketed towards the Krenum fleet, Cook opened a channel to his team. "Remember your training. Push yourselves to the limit, but don't overextend. We can't afford any burnouts or breakdowns out there." The battle erupted in a maelstrom of energy weapons and explosions. Cook's craft wove through the chaos, his reflexes allowing him to dodge incoming fire with millimeters to spare. He unleashed a barrage of energy blasts from his palms, each shot finding its mark with uncanny precision. Around him, his enhanced warriors tore through Krenum defenses. They leapt from ship to ship, their augmented strength allowing them to rip through hull plating with their bare hands. Energy crackled around them as they unleashed devastating attacks, each one worth a squadron of normal fighters. But even as they pushed back the Krenum assault, Cook noticed the strain on his troops. One soldier's movements became erratic, his energy blasts wild and uncontrolled. Another clutched his head in agony, blood trickling from his nose. "Fall back!" Cook ordered, catching a faltering comrade before he could drift into enemy fire. "Regroup and hold the line at Deimos!" As they retreated, Cook saw the fear in the eyes of the regular human forces they passed. He heard the whispers, felt the unease. These soldiers looked at Cook and his team not with gratitude, but with a mix of awe and terror. The enhanced warriors had turned the tide once again, but at what cost? As Cook watched his soldiers struggle with the aftermath of their exertions, the doubts he'd been suppressing bubbled to the surface. Had he pushed too far, too fast? But there was no time for second guessing. The Krenum were regrouping, and Earth needed its new breed of defenders. Whatever the consequences, whatever the cost, Cook knew he had to press on. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and he would. Alexander Cook stood in the dimly lit observation room, his enhanced eyes easily piercing the darkness as he watched the latest batch of volunteers undergo the grueling enhancement process. Screams echoed through the facility, a cacophony of agony that set his teeth on edge. "Status report," he barked into his comm unit. Dr. Amelia Chen's voice crackled back, tense but controlled. "Subject 117 is stabilizing, vital signs normalizing, 118 and 119 are still in flux. We're monitoring closely." Cook nodded, his gaze fixed on the writhing forms strapped to the medical tables. He'd been through this hell himself, felt every cell in his body torn apart and reassembled. But the ends justified the means. They had to. A hand clasped his shoulder. Cook turned to see Zorax, the Aetheri's large eyes filled with concern. "This path leads to ruin, Alexander," Zorax said, his voice a low rumble. "You're meddling with forces beyond your comprehension." Cook shrugged off the alien's touch. "We're out of options, Zorax. You've seen what the Krenum can do. Without these enhanced soldiers, humanity doesn't stand a chance." "And what of humanity's soul?" Zorax pressed. "What will be left of your species when this is over?" Before Cook could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in an eerie glow. "Perimeter breach!" a voice shouted over the comms. "Multiple Krenum warships approaching the shipyards!" Cook's body tensed, combat-ready energy surging through his enhanced form. "Time to see what our new recruits can do," he growled. Minutes later, Cook led a squadron of freshly augmented warriors into the void of space. Their specialized combat suits allowed them to move freely in zero-G, propulsion units carrying them towards the Krenum fleet with startling speed. Energy weapons flared to life around them as Krenum fighters engaged. Cook dodged and weaved, his heightened reflexes allowing him to dance between plasma bolts with millimeters to spare. His team followed suit, a coordinated ballet of superhuman agility. "Form up on me," Cook ordered. "Remember your training. Push yourselves, but don't overextend." The enhanced soldiers unleashed their full fury on the Crenum forces. Cook watched in awe as Private Rodriguez tore through the hull of a Crenum cruiser with his bare hands, while Sergeant Way's energy blasts decimated entire squadrons of enemy fighters. But even as they pushed back the Crenum assault, Cook noticed worrying signs. Corporal Jacobs's movements became erratic, his energy blasts wild and unfocused. And there was Lieutenant Patel, clutching her head in obvious agony, blood trickling from her nose in the zero-G environment. As Cook engaged a Crenum battle cruiser, a familiar voice cut through the chaos of battle. "So this is what you've done to your people, Alexander Cook." Spica's face appeared on Cook's heads-up display, the Crenum leader's eyes burning with a mixture of rage and fascination. "I've given them the power to fight back," Cook snarled, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts that rocked Spica's ship. "You've turned them into monsters," Spica shot back. "Tell me, human, how did you do it? What's the secret behind this abomination?" Cook's lips curled into a mirthless smile. "You want to know our secret, Spica? It's always been inside us. The Etheri artifact just unlocked our true potential. We're the next step in human evolution, and there's nothing you can do to stop us." Spica's eyes widened, a hint of fear creeping into his expression. "This isn't over, Cook. I'll find a way to counter this madness, even if I have to tear apart every star system in the galaxy to do it." The Crenum fleet began to retreat, their forces decimated by the enhanced human warriors. As the last enemy ships disappeared into hyperspace, Cook allowed himself a moment of triumph, but the victory felt hollow as he surveyed the cost. Bodies of enhanced soldiers drifted lifelessly in space, some torn apart by Crenum weapons, others victims of their own unstable powers. And among the survivors, Cook saw the toll their newfound abilities had taken. Exhaustion, pain, and a haunted look in their eyes that mirrored his own. Back on Earth, Cook faced a barrage of questions from military brass and civilian leadership. Some hailed him as a hero, while others hurled accusations of reckless endangerment and ethical violations. "The program works," Cook insisted, standing firm before the United Earth Council. "We've pushed back the Crenum, given humanity a fighting chance." "At what cost?" Counselor Zhang demanded. "We're receiving reports of enhanced soldiers suffering catastrophic genetic breakdowns, entire teams lost to madness and mutation." Cook's teeth gritted. "We're refining the process, implementing stricter screening protocols." "It's not enough," Zorax interrupted, stepping forward. "Alexander, please, the risks are too great. We must find another way." But Cook wouldn't be deterred. That night, he authorized a series of covert operations, dispatching his most stable enhanced operatives to neutralize key opposition figures. It was a necessary evil, he told himself, for the greater good. As reports of the disappearances trickled in, Cook felt the weight of his choices bearing down on him. The bond between humans and Etheri grew strained, whispers of mistrust spreading through both camps. Yet the Crenum threat loomed ever larger. Cook knew he couldn't stop now, couldn't turn back from the path he'd chosen. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and he would see this through to the bitter end, whatever the cost. Alexander Cook stood in the dimly lit laboratory, his enhanced eyes scanning the rows of stasis pods containing the latest batch of recruits. The air hummed with the sound of medical equipment and the occasional pained groan from the subjects undergoing genetic resequencing. "Status report," he barked, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. Dr. Chen, her face haggard from endless hours of work, approached with a datapad. "Sir, we've processed 30 new candidates in the past week. Success rate is declining. Only 12 have shown stable enhancements so far." Cook's lips pursed. "And the others?" Chen hesitated. 4 suffered complete cellular breakdown. 6 are showing signs of mental instability. The rest, the mutations are spreading faster than we can control. As if on cue, an agonized scream tore through the lab. Cook whirled to see one of the stasis pods violently shaking. Inside, a man thrashed against his restraints, his skin rippling and bulging as if something was trying to burst free. "Containment team to Pod 17, Chen shouted into her comm. Cook watched, his face a mask of stoic perseverance, as a team of heavily armed guards rushed to subdue the mutating subject. The screams continued, growing more inhuman by the second. "We need to refine the process," Cook muttered. "Push harder. Find a way to stabilize the enhancements." Chen looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Sir, we're already pushing the human genome to its limits. Any further and we risk nothing compared to what the Krenim will do if we fail," Cook snapped. "Double the resources. Triple them if you have to. I want results, Doctor." As Chen hurried away, Cook's comm unit buzzed. "Sir," a voice crackled, "we've received intelligence on a group of dissenters planning to expose the program. Your orders?" Cook's enhanced mind processed the implications in an instant. "Deploy Sigma Team. Eliminate the threats. No witnesses." Hours later, Cook stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching as a massive Krenim fleet emerged from hyperspace near the Earth-Mars shipyards. Alarms blared, and the comm channels exploded with panicked chatter. "All augmented units, prepare for immediate deployment," Cook ordered. "Tarkus, you have point on this one." Tarkus, a towering figure of muscle and barely contained energy, nodded sharply. "We'll send these alien bastards packing, sir." Cook watched as his enhanced warriors launched into the void of space. Tarkus led the charge, his body crackling with raw power as he tore through the hull of a Krenim cruiser with his bare hands. Around him, augmented soldiers unleashed devastating energy blasts, each one capable of crippling entire ships. The battle raged for hours, a spectacle of superhuman prowess against alien technology. Cook's forces seemed unstoppable, pushing back wave after wave of Krenim attackers. But even as victory seemed within reach, Cook noticed worrying signs. Some of his warriors moved erratically, their attacks growing wild and unfocused. Others clutched their heads in obvious agony, blood floating from their noses in the zero-G environment. From his command ship, Spica watched the carnage with a mixture of fear and fascination. "What have they done to themselves?" he muttered. Turning to his second-in-command, he barked, "Prepare a covert strike team. I want one of those enhanced humans captured, alive." As the main battle raged, a team of Krenim commandos slipped past the human defenses. They targeted a lone augmented warrior who had drifted away from the main group, his movements sluggish and uncoordinated. The capture was swift and brutal. Before the human could react, he was subdued and dragged aboard a cloaked Krenim vessel. As the ship sped away from the battlefield, Spica allowed himself a grim smile. Soon, the secrets of these human abominations would be his. Back on Earth, Cook faced a barrage of questions and accusations. The council chambers buzzed with angry voices. "Your enhanced soldiers are out of control, Cook," Counselor Zhang shouted. "We've received reports of entire cities leveled by your rogue elements." "Civilian casualties are mounting," Admiral Reyes added gravely. "The public is losing faith in the program." Cook stood firm, his enhanced physiology betraying no sign of stress. "We're at war, ladies and gentlemen. Sacrifices must be made for the greater good." "And who decides what that greater good is?" Zorax, the Etheri representative, stepped forward. "You've gone too far, Alexander. This madness must end." As the arguments raged on, Cook received an urgent message. His eyes widened as he read the contents. Without a word, he strode from the chamber, ignoring the shouts behind him. In a secure facility deep beneath the Earth's surface, Cook met with Tarkus and a handful of his most loyal enhanced warriors. "They're shutting us down," Cook growled. "Everything we've worked for, everything we've sacrificed, they're throwing it all away." Tarkus's massive fists clenched. "What are your orders, sir?" Cook's eyes blazed with cold fury. "We go dark. Take everything we can carry. We'll continue our work off-world beyond their reach." As alarms began to sound throughout the facility, Cook and his loyal followers made their escape. They fought their way past security forces, their enhanced abilities making short work of any resistance. Hours later, aboard a stolen stealth ship, Cook watched Earth shrink in the viewport. His face was set in grim lines as he plotted a course to a hidden base in a distant star system. "The real war begins now," he told his gathered followers, "and we'll do whatever it takes to—" Alexander Cook stood over the broken body of Corvin, his once promising Omega-class warrior. The air crackled with residual energy from their titanic clash, and the ground beneath them bore deep scars from the battle. "It's done," Tarkus said, his massive frame heaving with exertion. Cook nodded, his face a mask of cold perseverance. "Prep the body for analysis. We need to understand what went wrong." As they loaded Corvin's remains onto their transport, Cook surveyed the devastation around them. The settlement lay in ruins, buildings reduced to rubble and streets cratered by superhuman impacts. Smoke rose from dozens of fires, and in the distance, he heard the wails of survivors. Back at their hidden base, Cook strode through corridors hewn from solid rock, passing labs where scientists worked feverishly on the next generation of augmented soldiers. He entered a secure chamber where a holographic display showed the progress of their covert recruitment efforts. "Status report!" he barked at a nearby technician. The man flinched, his eyes darting nervously. "Sir, we've successfully brought in another 30 candidates from Earth's fringe colonies. They're prepped for the enhancement process." Cook's eyes narrowed. "And the unstable subjects?" The technician swallowed hard. Containment Team Alpha neutralized a group in Sector 7. There were civilian casualties. Cook waved dismissively. "Acceptable losses. We're at war." Later, in the primary enhancement lab, Cook watched as a new batch of recruits underwent the grueling genetic resequencing. Their bodies contorted in agony, bones cracking and reforming, muscles bulging grotesquely. Many screamed, some begged for death, but Cook remained unmoved. Dr. Reeves, the lead scientist, approached cautiously. "Sir, we've pushed the enhancements to unprecedented levels. The mortality rate—" "I don't want excuses," Cook snapped. "I want results. The Krenim are creating their own enhanced warriors. We need to stay ahead." As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the facility. Cook rushed to the command center, where a holographic display showed a massive Krenim fleet emerging from hyperspace near a human colony world. "They're testing their new prototypes," Tarkus growled, pointing to energy readings far beyond normal Krenim capabilities. Cook's eyes blazed with cold fury. "Then it's time we do the same. Deploy the Omega Squad." Hours later, Cook stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the battle unfold. His Omega warriors tore through Krenim ships with terrifying ease, their godlike powers reducing entire cruisers to scrap in seconds. But the enhanced Krenim fought back with equal ferocity. Cities burned on the planet below as the two forces clashed, their conflict escalating beyond anything seen before in the war. Cook's enhanced senses detected a familiar energy signature. There, in the heart of the Krenim fleet, stood Spica himself, now augmented with stolen human technology. "Tarkus, with me," Cook ordered, his body crackling with power. "It's time to end this." They launched themselves into the void, streaking towards Spica's command ship. As they neared, Spica emerged to meet them, his body twisted by alien enhancements. "This ends now, Cook!" Spica roared, his voice booming across space itself. Cook's lips curled into a snarl. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Spica." The two leaders collided in a blinding flash of energy, their battle shaking the very fabric of space-time. Cook fought with every ounce of his enhanced strength, driven by the weight of his choices and the lives he'd sacrificed. For a moment, he gained the upper hand, his fist connecting with Spica's jaw in a thunderous impact. But then, Krenim reinforcements swarmed in, forcing Cook to retreat. As he and Tarkus fell back to their ship, Cook's mind raced. The Krenim were adapting, evolving. He needed to push harder, go further, regardless of the cost. "Prepare Project Omega, Phase 2, he ordered Tarkus. "We're taking the gloves off." The battle raged on, a crucible of fire and fury that would reshape the galaxy forever. Alexander Cook stood before the stasis pod containing Corvin's remains, his enhanced eyes scanning every detail of the broken body within. The lab's harsh lighting cast deep shadows across his face, accentuating the lines of exhaustion etched into his features. "Sir," Dr. Chen's voice cut through his brooding. "The preliminary analysis is complete." Cook turned, fixing her with an intense stare. "And?" Chen hesitated, her fingers tightening on her datapad. The genetic instability was extreme. Corvin's DNA was unraveling at an accelerated rate. If you hadn't stopped him when you did, the resulting mutation could have been catastrophic. Cook's heart made. He pushed away the image of Corvin's final moments, the look of betrayal in his eyes as Cook's enhanced fist crushed his skull. "Implement new screening protocols immediately. I want fail-safes at every stage of the enhancement process." "Yes, sir," Chen nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. In the days that followed, Cook threw himself into refining Project Omega. He stood watch as a new batch of candidates underwent the grueling enhancement procedures, their bodies contorting in stasis pods as the genetic alterations took hold. Screams echoed through the facility, punctuated by the sickening crack of bones reforming and muscle fibers tearing. Cook watched impassively as one candidate's skin bubbled and sloughed off, revealing a layer of iridescent scales underneath. "Vitals dropping," a technician shouted. "We're losing him." "Push more power to the containment field," Cook ordered, his voice cold. "We can't afford to lose another one." The candidate's body jerked violently, then went still. For a moment, silence fell over the lab. Then, slowly, the pod's readout stabilized. "Enhancement complete," Dr. Chen announced, her voice tinged with both relief and awe. "Subject Echo 7 has survived the procedure." Cook allowed himself a small nod of satisfaction. "Prep him for combat trials. I want to see what he can do." Weeks passed in a blur of training exercises and simulated combat scenarios. Cook watched from an observation deck as Tarkus put the new Omega warriors through their paces, their enhanced bodies moving with impossible speed and grace. "They're stronger than the previous batch," Tarkus reported, his massive frame dwarfing Cook as they stood side by side. "Faster, too. But there's something off about them. They don't seem fully human anymore." Cook's eyes narrowed. "They're not meant to be human, Tarkus. They're meant to be weapons." Before Tarkus could respond, an alarm blared through the facility. Cook's enhanced mind processed the incoming data in an instant. "Cranem attack. They found us." The shipyard burned. Explosions bloomed in the vacuum of space as Cook's Omega warriors tore through the Cranem fleet. He watched from the bridge of his command ship, his enhanced senses allowing him to track every detail of the battle. Echo 7 moved like a force of nature, ripping through Cranem hulls with his bare hands. Beside him, other Omega warriors unleashed devastating energy blasts that reduced entire cruisers to molten slag. "Sir!" a communications officer called out. "We're detecting a massive energy signature. It's Spica!" Cook's lips curled into a snarl. So the bastard's finally shown himself. "Tarkus, with me." They launched themselves into the void, streaking toward Spica's command ship. As they neared, Cook saw him, a twisted mockery of his former self, his body bulging with alien enhancements. "Cook," Spica's voice boomed across the battlefield. "Your abominations end here." They collided in a blinding flash of energy. Cook felt his enhanced bones creak under the force of Spica's blows, but he gave as good as he got. His fist connected with Spica's jaw, sending the Cranem leader spiraling through space. For a moment, victory seemed within reach. Then, a swarm of Cranem reinforcements descended upon them. Cook snarled in frustration as Tarkus pulled him back towards their ship. "We need to fall back," Tarkus growled. "We can't hold them off forever." Cook watched as Spica regrouped, his enhanced form crackling with stolen power. "This isn't over," he muttered. Cook's eyes blazed with cold fury as he watched Spica regroup. "This isn't over," he snarled, his enhanced body crackling with barely contained energy. Back at the hidden base, Cook locked himself in the secure research lab. He hunched over terminals filled with stolen Crenum data, his fingers flying across holographic interfaces. Days blurred into weeks as he worked tirelessly, pushing his augmented mind to its limits. Dr. Chen approached cautiously, dark circles under her eyes. "Sir, we've identified a potential breakthrough in the Crenum genetic sequencing." Cook's head snapped up. "Show me!" Chen pulled up a complex DNA strand, highlighting specific sections. "By combining these Crenum adaptations with our most aggressive human enhancements, we could potentially create something beyond anything we've seen before." Cook's eyes narrowed. "Do it." In the weeks that followed, the base buzzed with feverish activity. New stasis pods were installed, each housing a volunteer subjected to the experimental process. Cook stood watch as their bodies contorted, bones cracking and reforming at an accelerated rate. Alarms blared as one pod's readings spiked dangerously. The occupant's skin rippled, muscles bulging grotesquely. Then, with a sickening crack, the pod shattered. The figure within lay motionless, its form twisted beyond recognition. "Another failure," Dr. Chen whispered, her voice heavy. Cook's teeth gritted. "Keep pushing. We don't have the luxury of caution." Days later, a different alarm sounded. Cook rushed to the lab, where a single pod pulsed with energy. As the mist cleared, a figure emerged, Tarkus, his body radiating power beyond anything they'd achieved before. Tarkus flexed his hands, energy crackling between his fingers, his eyes now glowing with an otherworldly light fixed on Cook. "Sir, what have you done to me?" Cook allowed himself a small smile. "I've given you the power to end this war, old friend." As more Omega Primes emerged from their pods, Cook set his plan in motion. He gathered his elite team on the bridge of his flagship, the stars outside replaced by the swirling vortex of hyperspace. "Our target is the Crenum homeworld," Cook announced, his voice cold and focused. "This is a one-way mission, victory or death." Tarkus, standing at Cook's side, nodded grimly. The other Omega Primes remained silent, their enhanced minds processing the weight of the task before them. The ship dropped out of hyperspace into chaos. The Crenum homeworld loomed before them, its orbital defenses already opening fire. Cook watched as his Omega Primes launched themselves into the void, their godlike powers on full display. Tarkus led the charge, tearing through Crenum ships with his bare hands. Energy beams that would have vaporized normal humans simply dissipated against his enhanced form. The other primes followed suit, unleashing devastation on a scale Cook had never before witnessed. On the planet's surface, Spica emerged to meet the threat. His augmented form crackled with stolen power as he engaged Tarkus in a titanic clash. The very air seemed to ignite around them as they traded blows that could shatter mountains. Cook watched the battle unfold from his command deck, his enhanced senses allowing him to track every detail. Pride swelled in his chest at the sheer destructive capability of his creations. Yet a gnawing unease grew in the pit of his stomach as he witnessed the scale of devastation they wrought. Suddenly, Tarkus gained the upper hand. With a roar that shook the heavens, he brought both fists down on Spica's head, driving the Crenum leader to his knees. Victory seemed within reach. Then, Spica laughed, a horrible gurgling sound. "You think you've won?" He spat, blood trickling from his mouth. "You've only ensured your own destruction." With his last ounce of strength, Spica slammed his hand down on a hidden control panel. A wave of sickly green energy erupted from the planet's core, washing over the battlefield. Cook watched in horror as his Omega Primes began to writhe in agony. Tarkus, his mind already strained by the enhancement process, was the first to fall. His body twisted and contorted, his cries of pain cutting off abruptly as he collapsed into a grotesque, pulsating mass. One by one, the other primes succumbed to the mutagenic wave. Their godlike powers turned inward, tearing them apart from the inside out. Cook's enhanced mind raced, searching desperately for a solution, as his ultimate weapons crumbled before his eyes. With a heavy heart, Cook made his choice. His fingers flew across the command console, initiating a sequence he had prayed he'd never have to use. A massive electromagnetic pulse erupted from his flagship, engulfing both the planet and the surrounding space. The pulse wiped out the mutagenic wave, but at a terrible cost. The remaining Omega Primes, already corrupted beyond salvation, were obliterated in an instant. As the light faded, Cook found himself alone, surrounded by the wreckage of his ambitions. The Krenim homeworld lay in ruins, its once mighty civilization reduced to ashes. But the price of victory was beyond measure. Cook stared out at the devastation, the weight of his choices crushing down upon him. With trembling hands, he set a course away from the battlefield. As his ship disappeared into the depths of space, Cook knew that he could never undo what he had wrought. The war was over, but the real battle, the one within his own soul, had only just begun.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.